The galaxy screamed in silence as another world died. Planet Veritas 7 cracked like an egg, its molten core spraying into the void while crystalline ships circled overhead like mechanical vultures. Below them, gaseous forms twisted through space, their victory song echoing in frequencies no solid being could hear. This was Tuesday in the outer spiral. For 3,000 years, the war had consumed everything. Stars that once warmed peaceful worlds now served as ammunition for weapons that could shatter reality itself. The Viridians, beings made of living crystal who sang to each other in perfect mathematical harmony, fought against the Netherians, clouds of intelligent gas who danced between dimensions like smoke in a hurricane. Neither side could remember why they started fighting, but both knew they could never stop. Dr. Amara Okafor pressed her face against the observation deck window of Station Harmony, watching the distant explosions paint the darkness in colors that had no names. Her dark skin reflected the alien lights as she counted the flashes. 43 dead worlds this month alone. The numbers didn't capture the horror of entire species vanishing in crossfire that wasn't even meant for them. Another peace talk failed, she whispered to the empty corridor behind her. The latest attempt had lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes before Prime Resonance Kale, the Viridian representative, declared that gas mines could never understand honor. Current bearer Nyx, speaking for the Netherians, had responded that crystal thoughts were too rigid to grasp the beauty of change. Both delegates left within minutes, their fleets already moving toward the next battleground. The Galactic Mediation Council had tried everything. Trade agreements meant nothing to beings who could synthesize any material they needed. Territorial concessions were useless when both sides wanted the other extinct. Religious appeals fell flat when your gods were mathematics or entropy. Cultural exchanges ended in violence when crystalline perfection met gaseous chaos. Amara walked through the station's central hub, past refugees from a dozen different species. The Lumina had been peaceful traders until their homeworld became a battlefield. Now only 3,000 of them remained, their bioluminescent skin dim with grief. The Keth had been master builders, constructing wonders that spanned solar systems. Their survivors huddled in maintenance shafts, too afraid to build anything that might attract attention. Every species had the same story. They were living their lives, developing their cultures, reaching for the stars when the war found them. Some tried to fight back and were crushed immediately. Others tried to run and were hunted down. A few attempted to hide and were discovered by accident during battles that raged across their hiding places. The worst part was how normal it had become. Children born on refugee stations had never seen a world that wasn't burning. They played games where one side was crystals and the other was gas, always fighting, never winning. Their parents didn't even try to explain peace anymore because they couldn't imagine what it would look like. In the medical bay, Dr. Yuki Tanaka worked on victims from the latest skirmish, a young apex whose parents had died when both fleets simultaneously attacked their research station, an elderly Korth whose species had been neutral for centuries until neutrality became impossible. Burns from crystal fire, mutations from gas spores, and worst of all, the empty stares of beings who had watched their entire civilizations disappear. The war had become a force of nature, like gravity or time. Astronomers included battle predictions in their star charts. Merchants planned trade routes around combat zones. Parents told their children bedtime stories about the time before the war, when the galaxy had been full of wonders instead of weapons. Station Harmony itself existed only because it sat in a zone both sides considered worthless. No strategic resources, no tactical advantages, no reason to fight over it. The neutral species who built it had chosen the location carefully, but even they knew it was temporary. Sooner or later, the war would find a reason to come here too. Amara returned to her quarters and pulled up the latest intelligence reports. The Viridian forces were developing something called a harmony cannon that could restructure matter at the quantum level, turning chaos into perfect order. The Netherians were growing new bioships that could phase entire fleets out of normal space-time, making them immune to conventional weapons. Both sides were always one breakthrough away from final victory, and both sides had been saying that for 1,000 years. The galaxy was dying by degrees, Trade had collapsed because shipping lanes were too dangerous. Scientific research stopped because laboratories became targets. Art and music and literature were forgotten because who had time for beauty when survival took everything you had? Even the great universities had closed, their students either dead or turned into soldiers. The Mediation Council met every month to discuss new peace initiatives, but everyone knew they were just going through the motions. How do you negotiate between beings who think in terms of perfect mathematical harmony and others who believe in the sacred nature of chaos? How do you find middle ground between species that literally cannot comprehend each other's basic thought processes? Ambassador Yan of the Peaceful Coalition had summed it up perfectly last week. We are trying to teach music to deaf beings and paint pictures for the blind. They cannot see what they are destroying because destruction is all they remember how to do. The war had momentum now, like a boulder rolling down a mountain. Every battle created grievances that demanded revenge. Every weapon developed by one side forced the other to create something worse. Every world that burned was proof that the enemy was evil and needed to be stopped. The logic was perfect and completely insane. Outside Amara's window, the stars continued their ancient dance, but fewer of them supported life than had yesterday. Tomorrow there would be fewer still. The galaxy was becoming a graveyard, decorated with the debris of civilizations that had committed no crime except existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Amara opened her computer and began typing her resignation letter. Earth's government had sent her here to help broker peace, but peace required two sides willing to stop fighting. What the galaxy needed wasn't a diplomat. It needed a miracle. She never sent the letter, because 3 days later the miracle arrived, in the form of a small fleet bearing an unfamiliar symbol and a simple message. This is Captain Rex Torres of the human vessel Pathfinder. We're here to help. The human ships looked like toys compared to the massive war vessels that dominated the galaxy. 5 small cruisers and a handful of support craft, their metal hulls scarred from long travel through the void. No reality-bending weapons, no quantum shields, no ability to phase between dimensions, just steel and ceramic and the stubborn determination of a species that had only recently learned to travel between stars. Captain Rex Torres studied the tactical display from the bridge of the Pathfinder, his weathered face lit by the glow of primitive monitors. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, checking systems that would have been considered ancient by galactic standards. Their fusion engines were simple. Their weapons were basic projectiles and energy beams. Their computers calculated probabilities instead of rewriting the laws of physics. Sensor contact, reported Lieutenant Ben Hayes from his station. 2 fleets converging on New Geneva colony. Looks like about 40 Viridian crystals and 30 Netherian bioships. Civilians? Torres asked, already knowing the answer. 2 million refugees from the Keth homeworld. They've been there less than a year. Torres nodded grimly. New Geneva had been established as a safe haven for species displaced by the war, but nowhere stayed safe for long. The colony sat on a minor trade route that both sides had suddenly decided was strategically important. The reasons didn't matter. What mattered was that 2 million innocent beings were about to become casualties in someone else's fight. Set. Course for the colony. All ships, prepare for refugee evacuation. Dr. Elena Martinez looked up from her xenobiology station. Captain, our cargo capacity is maybe 50,000 beings. We can't evacuate everyone. Then we'll make multiple trips, Torres replied. And we'll hope both fleets are too busy fighting each other to notice us. The human task force was officially part of Earth's deep space exploration program, but everyone knew their real mission. While other species either chose sides in the ancient war or tried to stay invisible, humans did something different. They went toward the fighting, not to join it but to help whoever needed help. It was a philosophy that made no sense to most galactic civilizations, who viewed humanitarian aid during wartime as either naive or insane. Lieutenant Kate Wilson piloted her shuttle through the debris fields surrounding New Geneva, dodging chunks of destroyed merchant ships and the crystalline fragments of older battles. Through her view screen, she could see the Viridian fleet approaching from the galactic north, their ships moving in perfect geometric formations that seemed to bend space around them. From the south came the Netherians, their biovessels rippling through dimensions like sea creatures swimming through honey. "This is Human Shuttle Mercy to New Geneva Control," she transmitted. "Beginning evacuation procedures. Priority to families with children, elderly, and wounded." The colony's administrator, a nervous Korth named Blix, appeared on her screen. "Human vessel, you need to leave immediately. Both fleets have issued warnings to all neutral craft. They will not guarantee your safety." "Noted and ignored," Wilson replied cheerfully. "Start loading passengers. We'll take as many as we can carry." What followed was controlled chaos. Human shuttles landed and took off in continuous cycles, their crews working with desperate efficiency to cram refugees into every available space. They stripped out non-essential equipment to make room for more beings. They stacked cargo containers in hallways. They turned maintenance shafts into temporary passenger compartments. The two alien fleets reached weapons range while the evacuation was still underway. Both sides had done this dance countless times before. The Viridians would deploy in their traditional sphere formation, using mathematical precision to create overlapping fields of fire. The Netherians would spread into a chaotic cloud, each bioship moving independently to maximize unpredictability. The battle would last 6 to 8 hours, the colony would be destroyed, and both sides would claim victory while mourning their losses. Torres watched the alien formations take shape and made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of retreating to a safe distance, he positioned his small fleet directly between the two massive armadas and opened communications on all frequencies. "This is Captain Rex Torres of Earth to all vessels in this system. We have non-combatants in the evacuation zone. Both fleets will maintain current positions until civilian evacuation is complete." The response was immediate and predictable. Prime Battlesinger Dorn, commanding the Viridian forces, transmitted a harmonic pattern that roughly translated as contemptuous dismissal. The humans were insects, beneath notice, irrelevant to the great work of bringing order to chaos. Drift Commander, Vel leading the Netherian biofleet, responded with shifting gas patterns that conveyed amused tolerance. The humans were small chaos bringers, possibly useful allies, but certainly not worth delaying the glorious work of opposing crystalline tyranny. Both messages carried the same underlying assumption. Humans would either choose sides or flee, because those were the only two options that made sense in a universe divided between order and entropy. Neither side expected what happened next. When a Viridian cruiser broke formation and fired a warning shot across the bow of a refugee transport, human ships immediately engaged. Not just the Viridian cruiser, but every vessel in both fleets. Energy beams and kinetic projectiles filled space as 5 small human ships took on 70 of the galaxy's most advanced warships. The battle lasted exactly 18 minutes. The humans lost 2 cruisers and suffered heavy damage to the others. But in those 18 minutes, they did something that hadn't happened in 3,000 years of warfare. They forced both ancient enemies to work together, coordinating their defensive fire to deal with attacks that came from completely unexpected directions. Dr. Martinez, monitoring the battle from the Pathfinder's bridge, made careful notes as human tactics shattered alien predictions. "Commander?" Lisa Park's destroyer used ramming speed to take out a Netherian bioship, something their adaptive defenses weren't programmed to counter. Colonel Mike Chen's cruiser squadron employed fighter tactics in 3 dimensions, using asteroids and debris as cover in ways that confused both sides' targeting systems. Most importantly, the humans refused to follow the established rules. They didn't form neat battle lines or maintain proper formation spacing. They didn't focus their fire on a single target or retreat when outgunned. They attacked everything, defended nothing, and made tactical decisions based on immediate circumstances, rather than thousand-year-old doctrines. When the smoke cleared, both alien fleets found themselves in an unprecedented situation. They had cooperated, however briefly, against a common threat. They had adapted their tactics to counter an enemy neither had ever fought before. They had been forced to think in new ways. For the first time in millennia, the ancient war had been interrupted by something neither side had planned for. genuine unpredictability. Torres, bleeding from a head wound as his damaged bridge sparked around him, opened communications one final time. Evacuation complete. All civilian transports are clear of the combat zone. You may now resume your regularly scheduled apocalypse. The two fleets stared at each other across the void, their commanders trying to process what had just happened. In the space of 18 minutes, a handful of primitive vessels had done what the combined might of the Galactic Mediation Council couldn't accomplish in centuries. They had made both sides stop fighting and pay attention to something else. But the most important change wasn't in space. It was in the minds of the beings who had witnessed something impossible, a species that chose to help instead of choosing sides. News of the New Geneva incident spread through both fleets like a computer virus, corrupting ancient certainties with impossible data. For 3,000 years, every battle had followed predictable patterns. Viridians would deploy in geometric perfection, Netherians would respond with chaotic fluidity, and the dance of mutual destruction would continue until one side withdrew. The arrival of humans had introduced variables that neither side's tactical computers could process. Admiral Sarah Kim received the reports while reviewing supply manifests in her cramped quarters aboard the carrier Independence. The human relief fleet had grown to 47 vessels as more ships arrived from Earth, bringing medical supplies, food synthesizers, and prefabricated shelters for the endless stream of war refugees. Each ship carried crews trained not for combat, but for the infinitely more complex task of saving lives in the middle of other people's wars. "Admiral," her communications officer called from the bridge, "we're receiving simultaneous transmissions from both hostile fleets. They want to talk." Kim pulled up the tactical display, noting the massive buildup of alien forces in nearby systems. Over 10,000 ships combined, the largest concentration of firepower in recorded galactic history. All of it aimed at humanity's tiny relief. Fleet Prime Resonance. Kale appeared first on her main screen, a towering crystalline being whose faceted surface reflected light in patterns that hurt human eyes to watch. When it spoke, its voice was a harmony of pure mathematics given sound. "Humans, you have disrupted the natural order. Choose alliance with Crystal Truth or face extinction alongside the Chaos Spawn." The second transmission came from current bearer, Nyx, a swirling mass of purple and gold gases that shifted constantly between different configurations. Its communication was a symphony of chemical reactions that the ship's computer translated into barely comprehensible concepts. "Small flesh thoughts. You dance between certainties. Join the eternal flow against rigid death or become static silence with crystal minds." Admiral Kim studied both aliens for a long moment, then smiled. "Computer, prepare a response on all frequencies. Full galaxy-wide broadcast." She straightened her uniform and looked directly into the camera. "This is Admiral Sarah Kim of the Human Relief Fleet. I've received your ultimatums and I have a response for both of you. Humanity chooses neither side. We choose the refugees, the civilians and the worlds caught between you. We choose the Lumina children who've never seen their homeworld. We choose the Keth elders who remember when this galaxy was full of wonders instead of weapons. We choose every being you've both forgotten in your rush to destroy each other." She paused, letting her words sink in. "If you want to continue your war, you'll have to go through us. And unlike your usual enemies, we don't fight according to your rules." The response was immediate. Both fleets began moving toward human positions, their ancient hatred temporarily set aside in favor of eliminating this new irritant. 10,000 ships against 47. The mathematics were clear to everyone except the humans, who had never been particularly good at accepting impossible odds. Kim activated the fleet's emergency protocols, sending a single coded message to all human vessels. "Plan Omega. Execute immediately." What followed was the most chaotic battle in galactic history. Instead of forming defensive positions or attempting to flee, the human ships scattered in every direction like seeds in a windstorm. Each group followed completely different tactical doctrines, some dating back to ancient Earth naval combat, others adapted from atmospheric fighter tactics, and a few improvised on the spot by commanders who had read too much military history. "Commander, Lisa Park's destroyer group descended toward the system's asteroid belt. Using thousand-year-old submarine warfare tactics, they hid behind rock formations, fired torpedo spreads from concealment, and vanished into the debris before enemy forces could respond. The Viridians, who had spent millennia perfecting their responses to Netherian phase shifting, found their tactical computers generating error messages when trying to predict where the next attack would come from. Colonel Mike Chen's cruiser squadron treated space like an ocean of air, employing World War II fighter tactics in 3 dimensions. They dove down from the galactic plane, executed barrel rolls around enemy formations, and used the system's gas giant as cover for attack runs that defied every principle of space combat. The Netherians, whose bioships were evolved to counter crystalline energy weapons, discovered that human kinetic rounds could punch through their adaptive defenses before those defenses knew what to adapt against. Captain Diana Ross's frigate wing implemented pure guerrilla warfare, hitting supply convoys and vanishing before retaliation could arrive. They targeted fuel depots, communication relays, and command vessels, forcing both alien fleets to divert resources to defend assets they had never needed to protect before. The most devastating human tactic was also the simplest. They refused to fight fair. When Viridian ships formed their traditional sphere formations, humans attacked from directly above and below, angles their geometric thinking hadn't accounted for. When Netherian biovessels spread into chaotic clouds, humans launched coordinated strikes at their centers of mass, exploiting the gap between individual ship chaos and fleet-level patterns. Dr. Elena Martinez monitored the battle from the medical ship Mercy, watching her instruments record something unprecedented. For the first time in 3,000 years, both alien fleets were changing their tactics in the middle of combat. Viridian crystals began forming new geometric patterns, trying to account for 3-dimensional threats. Netherian bioships started, coordinating their individual chaos into group strategies. "They're learning," she reported to Admiral Kim. "Both sides are adapting to counter our unpredictability." "Good," Kim replied, watching her tactical display show impossible odds gradually, becoming merely terrible odds. Learning means they're thinking, and thinking means they can change. The battle raged for 6 hours, but it wasn't like the ancient conflicts that had consumed the galaxy. This was education disguised as warfare, with humans serving as the galaxy's most explosive teachers. Every human tactic that succeeded forced both alien sides to question their assumptions about how combat worked. Every human failure proved that adaptation was possible even for beings who had been locked in the same patterns for millennia. Lieutenant Ben Hayes, commanding the damaged cruiser Defiance, found himself surrounded by both Viridian crystals and Netherian bioships. Instead of surrendering or going out in a blaze of glory, he did something that broke 3,000 years of precedent. He opened communications to both fleets simultaneously. "This is Lieutenant Hayes to all vessels. I'm going to try something new. Instead of fighting you, I'm going to tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a galaxy full of different kinds of minds, each one seeing the universe in their own unique way. Some saw mathematics and harmony, others saw change and growth, and still others saw possibilities that nobody had imagined yet. The communication channel stayed open. Both fleets held their fire, waiting to hear how the story ended. The different minds spent so long fighting each other that they forgot how to create anything new. They became so focused on winning that they lost track of what they were winning for. Until one day, a new kind of mind arrived and asked a simple question: what if there was another way? Hayes paused, looking around his damaged bridge at crew members who were bleeding but still manning their stations. "I don't know how this story ends, but I know how I want it to end. I want it to end with all of us working together to build something better than what we're destroying." For the first time in galactic history, a human weapon powered down in the middle of combat. Other human ships followed suit, one by one, until the entire relief fleet hung defenseless in space surrounded by 10,000 alien warships. The silence that followed lasted exactly 17 minutes and 32 seconds. During that time, beings across the galaxy held their breath, waiting to see if hatred was stronger than hope. The answer came from an unexpected source: the youngest members of both alien fleets, who had been born into war but had never seen anything like what the humans were offering. The silence stretched across space like a held breath, while 10,000 alien warships surrounded 47 defenseless human vessels. On a million worlds, beings watched their screens and waited to see if genocide or mercy would write the next chapter of galactic history. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, 3,000 years of momentum pushing toward annihilation, while something new and fragile pushed back. Dr. Amara Okafor worked frantically in the communications center of Station Harmony, her fingers flying over controls that connected her to every major network in the galaxy. This was humanity's moment, their chance to break a cycle that had consumed civilizations before humans even learned to make fire. She opened channels to news networks, educational institutions, refugee camps, and most importantly, to the homes, where ordinary beings were watching their children sleep and wondering if there would be a future for them. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice carrying to billions of listeners. "For 3,000 years you've been told that this war was inevitable, that some kinds of minds can never understand each other, that the universe is too small for beings who think differently. Today you're watching proof that those things were never true." Her words reached Viridian crystal cities where young beings had never heard their harmonic parents question the mathematics of eternal war. They touched Netherian gas clouds where adolescent currents had never imagined existence without the dance of opposition. They found their way to refugee camps where children born in exile heard someone suggest for the first time that their suffering might not be permanent. On the bridge of the Viridian flagship Eternal Harmony, Prime Resonance, Kale experienced something unprecedented: doubt. For 3 millennia, the crystal being had calculated the same equation with absolute certainty. Netherians represented chaos that must be corrected into order, but the humans had introduced new variables. They were solid beings like Viridians, yet they embraced chaos like Netherians. They created order from disorder without destroying the disorder itself. The mathematical impossibility of human existence was giving Kale what his species would call system errors, if they could admit that their perfect minds were capable of error. How could beings with structured bodies and organized societies choose to help the chaotic gas forms? How could mathematics account for behavior that served no logical self-interest? Aboard the Netherian bio-ship Infinite Drift Current Bearer, Nyx faced a similar crisis. The Netherians had defined themselves as the eternal opposition to crystalline rigidity, but the humans were rigid beings who opposed nothing and embraced everything. They had structure without tyranny, plans without inflexibility. They were proof that order and chaos could exist in the same mind without destroying each other. The collective consciousness of the Netherians, which had flowed in the same patterns for millennia, began to fragment as individual currents started asking questions that had no answers. If solid forms could carry chaos within structure, then what did it mean to be Netherian? If opposition to crystals wasn't the only way to exist, then what were they fighting for? The breakthrough came from the children. On both sides, the youngest. Members of each species had been born into war but had never experienced peace. To them, the human offer wasn't a radical departure from tradition. It was the first new idea they had ever heard. Envoy Pax, a young Viridian whose crystalline structure still held the flexibility of youth, began resonating in frequencies that had never been heard before. Instead of pure mathematical harmony, Pax's song incorporated irregular patterns that somehow made the regular ones more beautiful. The sound was wrong according to every principle of Viridian acoustics, yet it worked. The new harmony spread through the Viridian fleet like a virus, causing ancient crystals to vibrate in ways they hadn't for centuries. Elder beings found their rigid thought patterns loosening as they tried to understand how chaos could enhance order instead of destroying it. Simultaneously, flow singer Zara, a young Netherian who had always been curious about the strange regularity of crystal thoughts, began demonstrating something impossible: individual consciousness within collective flow. Instead of merging completely with the greater gas cloud of Netherian awareness, Zara maintained distinct identity while still contributing to the whole. The concept rippled through the Netherian biofleet, causing ancient gas beings to experience what they had never imagined: the beauty of structure that enhanced change instead of preventing it. Individual currents began forming stable patterns within the chaos, creating new forms of consciousness that were both one and many. Captain Rex Torres, watching these developments from his damaged bridge, felt the weight of history pressing down on him. His small fleet had stumbled into something far bigger than a rescue mission. They had become catalysts for the greatest transformation the galaxy had ever seen. Admiral Kim, he transmitted to the fleet commander, "I'm seeing new harmonic patterns from the Viridian ships and some kind of structured flow from the Netherians. I think they're trying to communicate." "All human vessels stand by," Kim responded. "Something's changing out there." What followed was the first three-way conversation in galactic history. Prime Resonance Kale's voice, now carrying undertones of beautiful chaos mixed with current-bearer Nyx's communication, now structured enough for solid beings to understand. And threading through both alien voices was Captain Torres, speaking for a species that had never learned that some things were impossible. "We've been fighting for so long," Kale's new harmony conveyed concepts of regret and hope, "that we forgot what we were trying to protect. We opposed crystal thought so completely," Nyx's structured flow carried similar emotions, "that we became rigid in our opposition to rigidity." "Maybe," Torres suggested quietly, "you weren't fighting each other. Maybe you were both fighting the idea that there was only one right way to exist." The conversation lasted for hours, broadcast live to every inhabited world in the galaxy. Beings who had known nothing but war for 3,000 years listened as their ancient enemies discovered they had more in common than either had imagined. Both species valued beauty, growth, and the continuation of life. They simply expressed those values in different ways. The moment that changed everything came when Envoy Pax and Flowsinger Zara met in the space between their fleets. The young Viridian's crystalline form resonated with new harmonies, while the young Netherian's gaseous consciousness maintained individual coherence within collective flow. When they touched, crystal and gas interacting in patterns that should have been mutually destructive, something unprecedented happened. They created art together. The sculpture that emerged from their collaboration was impossible by every standard of both civilizations. It was solid crystal that flowed like gas, organized chaos that sang in mathematical harmony. It was proof that differences didn't have to mean conflict, that diversity could create beauty that no single perspective could achieve alone. The image of that sculpture, transmitted across the galaxy, broke something that had been building for 3,000 years. The momentum of endless war, sustained by the certainty that the other side could never be understood, finally met an immovable object, evidence that understanding was not only possible, but beautiful. Prime Resonance, Kale and current-bearer Nyx, speaking together for the first time in millennia, issued a joint statement that would echo through history. "We call for immediate ceasefire on all fronts. We call for our fleets to stand down. We call for our peoples to remember what we were, before we became defined by what we opposed." The war that no one could stop stopped itself, not through victory or defeat, but through the simple recognition that it no longer served any purpose that either side remembered choosing. But the real victory belonged to the humans, who had changed the game not by being stronger or smarter, but by refusing to accept that the game could only be played one way. 1 year after the impossible peace began, the galaxy looked completely different. Where massive battle fleets had once patrolled hunting for enemies, joint exploration vessels now searched for new wonders among the stars. The former war zones had become the most prosperous regions in known space, as three radically different kinds of consciousness discovered what they could accomplish together. Admiral Sarah Kim stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching construction. Crews put the finishing touches on the galaxy's first tri-species research facility. Viridian crystals grew the station's supporting structure with mathematical precision, their geometric forms creating a framework of impossible beauty. Netherian bioengineers guided the growth of living systems that could adapt to any environment, their organic networks pulsing with controlled chaos. Human technicians connected everything together with practical solutions that neither alien species would have considered. creating hybrid technologies that worked better than anything any single civilization had ever built. The station itself was a monument to what the galaxy had almost lost. For 3,000 years, the war had consumed not just lives but possibilities. Scientific research had stopped because laboratories became targets. Art had withered because beauty was a luxury no one could afford. Philosophy had simplified into us versus them because complex thought was dangerous in a universe where difference meant death. Now young Viridians studied Netherian flow dynamics to create crystals that could change shape while maintaining their essential structure. Young Netherians learned mathematical harmony to give their chaotic movements purpose and direction. And humans, who had always been good at learning from others, absorbed techniques from both species to become something new. Bridges between ways of thinking that had seemed forever separate. Dr. Elena Martinez published her findings on tri-species cooperation in the New Galactic Journal, the first scientific publication to accept papers written jointly by crystal minds, gas consciousness, and biological brains. Her research proved what many had suspected. The three species weren't just compatible, they were complementary. Viridian precision eliminated waste, Netherian adaptability handled unexpected problems, and human unpredictability found solutions that neither of the others would have imagined. The economic transformation was equally dramatic. Trade routes that had been abandoned for centuries reopened as safe passage became possible. The Keth, master builders who had hidden in refugee camps, returned to their work with new techniques learned from both former enemies. The Lumina, peaceful traders whose bioluminescent art had been considered extinct, found new markets hungry for beauty after millennia of seeing nothing but weapons. Captain Rex Torres commanded one of the new exploration vessels, the CSS Unity, whose crew included beings from 17 different species. His current mission was surveying the outer rim for suitable colony worlds. But his real job was proving that cooperation could work on the small scale as well as the large. Every day brought new challenges that required different kinds of thinking to solve, and every solution strengthened the bonds between crew members who had once been taught to fear each other. "Captain," reported Envoy Pax from the science station, the young Viridian's crystalline form now incorporating the fluid curves that came from years of working with Netherian colleagues, "we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the fourth planet. It appears to be artificial." Flow singer Zara, whose gaseous consciousness maintained individual identity while contributing to the ship's collective awareness, added observations that complemented the Viridian data. The patterns suggest intelligence, but not from any known species. This could be evidence of precursor civilizations. Torres smiled, remembering when such discoveries would have been immediately claimed by whichever faction found them first, leading to battles that destroyed the very things they were fighting over. Now the Unity's first action was to transmit their findings to the Galactic Archives, making the knowledge available to everyone. "Prepare landing parties," Torres ordered. "Full scientific complement. And remember, we're not here to claim anything, we're here to learn." The discovery on the fourth planet changed everything once again. The ruins belonged to a species that had existed before the war began, a civilization that had somehow combined crystal technology, gas-based biology, and mechanical engineering in ways that seemed impossible. Their cities were grown from living crystal that breathed like gas and moved like machinery. Dr. Amara Okafor, now serving as the first Secretary General of the reformed Galactic Council, received the reports from her office on Central Station. The implications were staggering. The precursor species hadn't just achieved tri-species cooperation, they had been a tri-species civilization from the beginning. Crystal, gas, and biological components working together as a single people. The archaeological evidence painted a picture of incredible achievement: cities that grew themselves, ships that thought, art that lived and breathed and sang in frequencies that touched the soul. But something had destroyed them, leaving only ruins and the faint genetic traces that had eventually evolved into the Viridians, Netherians, and dozens of other species. "They were us," Amara whispered, studying the holographic reconstructions. "Or we were them, before something made us forget how to be together." The mystery of what had destroyed the precursors became the galaxy's greatest archaeological project. Teams of Viridian mathematicians, Netherian flow analysts, and human pattern recognizers worked together to piece together the final days of the ancient civilization. What they found was both terrifying and inspiring. The precursors hadn't been destroyed by war or disaster. They had been destroyed by success. Their technology had become so advanced, their civilization so perfect, that they had transcended physical existence entirely. The ruins weren't evidence of death but of transformation, the entire species evolving beyond the need for matter and energy. But they had left something behind, a message encoded in the quantum structure of space itself, waiting for the day when their scattered children would rediscover cooperation and become capable of reading it. Prime Resonance Kale and current bearer Nyx, now serving as joint ambassadors to the Reformed Council, were present when the message was finally decoded. The translation process required all three species working together, crystal minds providing mathematical frameworks, gas consciousness supplying intuitive leaps, and human creativity bridging the gaps between logic and inspiration. The message was simple and profound. To our children who forgot they were family, the universe is vast and full of wonders, but also full of dangers that no single way of thinking can face alone. We became more than we were by choosing unity over purity. You can too. The choice is always yours. The revelation transformed the galaxy's understanding of itself. The ancient war hadn't been between alien species, but between siblings who had forgotten their common origin. The differences that had seemed irreconcilable weren't flaws to be corrected, but features to be celebrated, pieces of a larger puzzle that was beautiful precisely because it was incomplete without all its parts. 5 years after the war ended, the first joint colony ship left for the Andromeda Galaxy. The CSS New Beginning carried 10,000 volunteers from 47 different species, all working together to establish the first extragalactic settlement in known history. The ship itself was a masterwork of tri-species engineering, a Viridian crystal core that provided perfect structural integrity, Netherian biosystems that could adapt to any environment, and human-designed interfaces that made it all work together. Captain Torres, now promoted to Commodore, stood on the ship's bridge as they entered the final phase of their journey. Around him, beings who had once been taught to hate each other worked side by side, their differences making them stronger rather than dividing them. "Final approach to our new home," reported the navigation officer, a young human who had grown up on stories of the ancient war but had never seen it as anything but ancient history. Through the view screen, the new world appeared, a planet with crystal formations that sang in the wind, gaseous organisms that danced through the atmosphere, and organic life that pulsed with the rhythm of growing things. It was a world that needed all three kinds of consciousness to unlock its secrets, a perfect symbol of what the galaxy had become. As the ship entered orbit, Torres opened a channel to broadcast back to the home galaxy, knowing that his words would reach billions of beings who were just beginning to understand what was possible when different minds worked together. "This is Commodore Torres of the New Beginning to all stations. We have arrived at our destination, and it's more beautiful than we imagined. The first tri-species colony is about to become reality. For our children who will grow up here, cooperation won't be a miracle or an experiment. It will just be the way things are." He paused, looking around at his diverse crew. The humans didn't change the game by being stronger or smarter than anyone else. We changed it by refusing to accept that the game could only be played one way, and now we're all playing a new game together, with rules we're writing as we go. The transmission ended, but the work continued. On the new world below, crystal formations began growing in patterns influenced by gaseous flows and organic rhythms. In orbit above, beings who had once been enemies shared their first meal in a new galaxy, their children playing games that incorporated mathematical precision, flowing adaptation, and creative chaos. The war that no one could stop had become a peace that no one wanted to end. And in the vast darkness between galaxies, other ancient conflicts paused to wonder if change was possible for them too. The game had changed, and the universe would never be the same.